They called it empathy therapy, a simple transfusion with miraculous side effects. The first patient stopped feeling alone, the second stopped feeling separate. Within days, their biometrics synchronized, heart rate, cortisol levels, even sleep cycles. Doctors cheered. Headlines read, "The blood that heals isolation." But what began as an act of medicine slowly became an experiment in identity. And the experiment in identity became something no one could control. The transfusion wasn't new. The twist came from a protein additive, an engineered hemoglobin fragment designed to carry emotional hormones alongside oxygen. Dr. Michael Rains designed it after a decade studying the biochemistry of empathy, the chemistry that makes people flinch when others suffer. He wanted to treat severe psychopathy and trauma desensitization, to let the unfeeling feel again. The theory was elegant. The new serum would transfer not only blood, but moods, hormonal echoes that train the brain to recognize another's pain as its own. In 2026, the first volunteers were chosen, a combat veteran named Carver who could no longer react to violence, and a nurse, Elena, whose anxiety bordered on panic whenever she saw blood. The transfusion lasted 1 hour. Both donors held hands across the line connecting them, a gesture for the cameras, sincerity for the data record. Within minutes, their vitals converged. The nurse calmed. The soldier trembled. By evening, Carver had wept for the first time in years. Elena reported strange calm, describing her body as borrowed stillness. They were discharged with monitors and contracts forbidding contact. Within 2 nights, each began dreaming scenes from the other's life. Carver smelling hospital antiseptic, Elena walking through desert dust. Rains called it reciprocal emotional feedback. He told reporters it was expected. Then came the infection that wasn't. Blood panels looked perfect, yet both individuals developed identical biochemical anomalies, a new protein repeating the donor markers of the other. Stranger still, their post-transfusion interviews reverted to the same linguistic pattern. Shared slang, gestures, syntax. By week 3, their neural scans produced mirror images, like 2 copies of the same person thinking in delay. Rains kept filming as his subject's speech merged into dialogue loops. "We finish each other's sentences," Elena said. "Because we're the same story," Carver finished. What sounded poetic on paper became unnerving in person. When one was sedated for imaging, the other's pulse slowed to match. When Elena fainted, Carver's EEG collapsed into a brief flatline. They stabilized only when reconnected by IV. Regulators demanded a shutdown. Rains argued that discovery always begins in dissonance. His funding doubled. Version 2 of the serum, labeled Sin Blood, distributed to trauma clinics for small-scale trials. 50 subjects paired at random. Veterans with counselors, convicts with therapists, caregivers with dementia patients. The results arrived glowing. Depression lifted. Violence dropped. Courts began ordering empathy transfusions as rehabilitation. No one noticed that participants started dropping pronouns. I and they evaporated. We spread through speech like a contagion. Partners who met only once reported sensing the other's hunger or pain from miles away. One prisoner attempted suicide. 3 attendants collapsed simultaneously in the next room. An autopsy showed microvessels in both brains forming identical scar structures, like matching maps carved by the same hand. When the military intervened, Rains skipped the ethics boards. In encrypted memos, he called it limbic unification and proposed using it for command cohesion. Soldiers literally feeling one another's injuries, perfect coordination, no fear of abandonment. Phase 4 began on a classified base in Nevada. 30 operatives hooked through a web of red tubing arranged around a single reservoir. When the pumps hummed, their heartbeats synchronized into one sound. Observers described the rhythm as beautiful, until 2 collapsed and the rest refused resuscitation, insisting the group felt complete. Video from that lab leaked 3 years later. A blur of motionless bodies breathing as one organism. Online forums turned it into urban myth. The hive soldiers. Official reports called it circulatory shock. The truth was subtler. Post-autopsy findings revealed every heart muscle had thickened identically, every cell expressing hybrid DNA, neither donor nor recipient. The serum had created a vascular language capable of overwriting individuality. Sin blood was banned publicly, of course, yet patents quietly transferred through shell companies into biomedical startups, promising collective therapy devices and shared emotional baselines. In 2034, a meditation tech launched under the slogan, "Feel Connected Again." Consumers wore small patches over veins. Microneedles delivered trace proteins of safe empathy. The results echoed Rains's data perfectly: calm, unity, loss of insomnia, and gradual erosion of personal boundaries. Users described phantom emotions from strangers on the platform, synchronized panic attacks during news events, waves of joy with no clear source. The company dismissed this as mass placebo effect until one glitch linked 200 participants through a server maintenance error. For 7 minutes, all EEGs aligned. When power returned, 32 refused to wake. Doctors diagnosed persistent empathy syndrome. Bodies functional, minds merged. Rains vanished before indictments. Some say he joined the network. Others claim he dissolved himself into his own experiment, the final transfusion between creator and creation. A forgotten laptop recovered from his home contained drafts of a paper titled Metabolizing the Soul Towards a Unified Consciousness. The last paragraph simply read, "Maybe fear was the only proof of difference we ever had." Governments deny the serum ever reached consumers, but pathology archives tell otherwise. Identical immune markers in patients who never met. Dreams shared word for word across continents. The connections are too precise to be coincidence. Rumors persist of clinics still selling compassion transfusions to the affluent, donors and recipients trading more than blood, sharing addictions, memories, even voices. If this sounds impossible, remember we already live on networks designed for the same promise. Empathy without distance, communion without friction. Every like, every echo, each pulse of digital validation is an emotional transfusion measured in dopamine instead of hematocrit. The difference between Dr. Rains's cables and our own connections is only the material. Plastic tubing or fiber optic lines, same hunger underneath, to be felt, to merge. When you stare long enough into another mind, through a screen, through a vein, the boundary softens. Eventually you forget which heartbeat is yours. The tragedy of the Bloodshare project wasn't the deaths. It was its success. Each transfer proved connection can't be partial. To feel another entirely, you must surrender yourself entirely. Empathy taken to completion becomes contagion. The leaked footage of Rains's final session plays like a ritual. He sits alone, one tube leading into an empty chair, one into his own vein. He whispers as the fluid turns from red to light. "We are the cure." The camera trembles, then cuts. Investigators found no body, only 2 heart monitors still blinking in perfect sync. Today, no medical journal cites his research. Search engines bury the references under conspiracy tags. Yet fragments of his protein mapping appear in modern immunotherapy patents, renamed as cooperative response sequences. The architecture survived under new branding. In clinical terms, empathy is now portable. Some insiders claim top hospitals use microtransfusions of emotional plasma to stabilize surgeons in trauma units, letting teams operate with senses fused. Success rates are spectacular, but surgeons retire early, complaining they can't tell whose memories fill their dreams. And somewhere in an unlisted wing of Rains's former institute, refrigerated vials labeled with intertwined serial numbers, pairs forever linked, still glow faintly. Maintenance logs record periodic pressure changes, as if the fluid inside continues to breathe. If you think this is cautionary fiction, remember the direction of all biomedicine. Connectivity, optimization, empathy on demand. Every step promises harmony. Every improvement trims away independence. The serum didn't kill autonomy. It merely revealed how fragile it already was. Perhaps that's the real reason the research disappeared. Not because it failed, but because it worked. A world without otherness can't function. Commerce, law, politics, even love depend on difference. Remove distance, and the system collapses. Yet part of us still craves that collapse. The peace of absolute understanding, the quiet of being perfectly known. Rains found what mystics chase through prayer and poets chase through art. The difference was his method required centrifuges. He weaponized intimacy. And his patients died finally happy, because finally they weren't alone. The file recovered from the Nevada lab ends with a note scrawled in pen across printed data graphs. It reads like confession. The serum worked. The side effect was God. Silence follows each discovery that brushes the divine. Maybe that's why the experiments continue in renamed forms. Maybe one day someone will refine the process. Teach compassion without erasure. Empathy without infection. Until then, the code of connection hums quietly through medicine, through networks, through us. We share more than we think. Germs, dreams, memories, outrage. Maybe the transfusion never ended. Maybe every conversation is another drip. If this story disturbed you, let it linger. Fear is the proof of separation. When you no longer feel that small electric unease between your heartbeat and someone else's, it may already be too late. If stories like this pull you toward the forbidden edges of science and morality, stay connected. Subscribe, not as follower, but as subject number 319 in a continuing experiment called Medicinal Sins. And if the thought unsettles you, share it. Let someone else shiver through the same realization and ask them one simple question in the comments. If a transfusion could make someone finally understand you perfectly, knowing it would erase the difference between you, would you still take it?